Hey guys, this is Orion Webster back with another podcast for Forethought. I'm actually recording this, I guess like an hour after the last podcast that I uploaded, the dealing with mindset impediments to desired outcomes. So I might also happen to be playing Dark Souls still while I'm doing this. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about something that I think is extremely important when it comes to getting your desired outcomes, and that is how you feel on a daily basis, moment to moment. And honestly, I think it's something that, some of us take for granted, that we feel good or that we don't feel good. And I think one of the things that I actually didn't talk about in my mindset video that I probably should have talked about, but I was a little strapped for time, because like I said, I had a commitment coming up, but I still wanted to do that for you guys, is I didn't really talk about the state that we're in terms of our biology and the impact that has on the limits that we set on ourselves. So one thing that they found, and this is I think a pretty common thing that people will know, is that if you aren't getting enough energy to certain parts of your body or to certain parts of your brain, your body will downregulate your activity, and you will start to sort of fall into, let's say, neuroticism and fall into pessimism. And so you will assume that you're capable of less than you would if you had more energy. And so that's actually a really big deal. And so because of that, because I want to help you and help myself to remove the limitations that we're setting on ourselves, I think I'd like to spend some time going over things that you can do to kind of get your biology in order so that you can have more energy, so that you can, get rid of some of those limits and have an easier time of convincing yourself that you're actually going to be able to get to your desired outcomes. Because as people know, as cliche as it is, believing that you can do something and having the gas that you need to get your, the car of your body to where you want it to go is extremely important. So what are some things that you can do to turn on your brain, make yourself feel better, have more energy? One of the things that I've done, that I've been studying a lot, is the ketogenic diet. Now, before you start complaining about what eating a lot of saturated fat, or about how fat is bad for you and all that sort of stuff, I would implore you to, if you're not familiar with the ketogenic diet and with the bulletproof diet and things like that, I would implore you to sort of suspend your disbelief. Something that I'd offer to you is that I think, if your goal is results, something that you have to remember is that it is very important to not worry so much about how things look, but to worry and prioritize how things work, if that makes sense. So even though it might be strange in the current climate of fat phobia that we live in, and that we have lived in for many decades now, it might look weird to get an omelet and a pitcher of olive oil, but I think the reality of it is, if you eat that and you feel good and you perform well, and you go into your doctor and you look at your lipid profile and you look at your inflammatory markers and you look at all these things that you want to be measuring to figure out how healthy you are from a quantitative standpoint, and all those numbers are in the optimal ranges, or if they're improving over time as you change your diet to, let's say, eating more healthy fats, then that's what you want to be looking for, right? So there's the evidence, there's the actual data that what you're doing is healthy for you. And then also how you feel is really important, because I think something that comes up is sometimes people will be eating a certain diet that makes them feel good, or maybe it makes them feel good temporarily, and then they have some kind of crash, or after a period of time they don't feel so good anymore. So I think it's important to look at the data and to measure a lot of different things in order to make sure that you're actually getting healthier and that it will be sustainable. Because something else that comes up is, people do, and I do want to bring some attention to this, is they'll do a ketogenic diet where they're not being mindful of food quality, and so they're eating hot dogs and fried chicken, which are not keto foods. Number one, it's like they're not even real foods. I mean, I realize that, people, I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence here. I realize that people know that hot dogs and fried chicken are healthy, but a lot of people, because they like to eat like me, I like to eat, and I know what that's like. They hear, oh, if I don't eat carbs, I'll lose weight, and that's my goal, and I can still eat foods that I like fried chicken and hot dogs, as long as I don't have rice and as long as I don't put croutons in my salad. And it's like, okay, well, sure, from a scientific standpoint, if your insulin is lower, as it probably would be if you're not eating any carbs, even if you are eating shitty inflammatory foods like fried chicken and hot dogs, it's likely that you will lose water, and it is likely that you will lose some fat without really trying. But the reality is that even if your inflammation levels go down because you're not eating a lot of the grains and carbohydrates and sugar that you're eating, you're still going to be damaging your body eating those unhealthy, high fat and sort of damage oxidized foods. So that's really important as well. So I think something that you have to look at is food quality. So if you say, well, fats are bad for you, it's like, well, which fats, right? I think everybody at this point in history realizes that omega-3s are healthy for us, and that omega-6s, at least in mass quantities, are not healthy for us. I think it's been shown, actually, that it's likely that hunter-gatherer humans had a ratio of like 4-to-1 omega-3s to omega-6s, and that what would be optimal for us is somewhere around there, at least 2-to-1. And I think, although it's improved over the years, and I'm probably getting this data point wrong, but that people are still getting many, many times more omega-6s than omega-3s. It's still common for somebody to get like 20-to-1 omega-6s to omega-3s. And if you're not familiar, basically the skinny on it, and I'm not claiming, I should say also that I'm not claiming to be, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert in all this stuff. I just have researched a lot, and I'm an unlicensed biohacker and have been for some years. But anyway, basically omega-6s are part of the basis for the pro-inflammatory hormones. Now, obviously all of us know that acute inflammation, like what you get when you fall and hurt yourself and you get that swelling, is actually a good thing, because that's the body healing itself. And I think a lot of people are familiar with the fact that sort of the systemic inflammation that's low level and often subclinical, that is affecting the entire body and all the various systems of the body, is bad. And so the reality of it is that if you're eating, as you can guess, a lot of omega-6s, and you're making an excess of pro-inflammatory hormones, and yes, you do need some, because inflammation, for instance, is actually very important when it comes to something like hypertrophy, right? Stress and inflammatory cytokines are part of the signaling process to tell the body to grow and to overcompensate. So in order to get hypertrophy, you do need some amount of free radicals. You need some amount of inflammation. You just don't want too much inflammation, right? So, for instance, you wouldn't want to be taking a massive amount of antioxidants, because you can't have too many antioxidants and too few oxidants, basically. But you also obviously don't want to have too many, because that's not good for you either. So I think in biology it's important to state, if it hasn't been stated by others sufficiently, that finding that sweet spot is very important. So anyway, food quality really, really matters if you're going to do something like a ketogenic diet. So don't get stupid. Don't start eating, low sugar ice cream, right, with like low quality dairy and like weird oils in there because it's quote unquote low carb, right? That's not what you want to do. Don't say, oh, I'm having meat and nuts for breakfast, and then start chopping up, a fucking Oscar Mayer hot dog and putting peanuts in there. Like, you want to treat your body with respect, and if you want yourself to perform well, as you can guess, you also want to be putting in the finest ingredients that you can afford, so that's the other thing. Don't break the bank. I swear to, well, I'm not going to swear to God. I don't want to offend anybody here, although not that I'm that worried about that, but I don't want to get into that right now. But anyway, seriously, I don't want anybody to spend so much money on quality food that you're going to Whole Foods every day and paying $40 a pound for your steak, It's like, make intelligent choices, try to buy the best products that you can reasonably buy. So if that means, depending on where you're located, going to, a store that offers a little bit higher quality products than, like the equivalent of a Kroger or Fred Meyer or whatever you have nearby you, depending on what country you live in and so on and so forth. I'm located in the States, and frankly, I haven't really traveled out of the country, so I'm not that familiar with other stores. But, like, get something that is a little bit better, and try to get, better eggs, try to cut out sugar, et cetera, et cetera. There are basic things that you should do. And, to the end of food quality, I think it's important that you learn to flip over your foods and actually look at the nutrition facts. And of course, I realize people know this, but there's a lot of, to be honest, deception, at least here in the States. And I would imagine that it's not any different anywhere else, because, when there are perverse incentives, people do bad things regardless of where you are. And there are perverse incentives. I don't think I have to say that, but the reality of it is that companies go through a lot of hoops to deceive the consumer, and they will take the same ingredient that's bad for you and call it by 21 different names. That way they can trick you into thinking that you're making a healthier choice, when you're actually getting food filled with the same fillers and junk that you don't want. And trust me, if you don't think that those things make a difference, like, take a week or 2 week period to really detox yourself from all these various things in your food that you can't read, and then feel the difference, and then go buy like your favorite shitty donut or whatever the hell you were eating before, and you will notice an incredible difference in how you feel. I pretty much can guarantee you that. I've tried this experiment with friends where I'm like, okay, go on this ketogenic diet, do some bulletproof intermittent fasting, cut out these various foods, and then if you feel like it, like, try having a cheat meal, and then notice the tremendous hit that you take. Notice the swing in your IQ. Notice that, there's pains in your body that weren't there before. Notice that you have a little bit of brain fog, and that you're struggling to reach for certain words and things like that. It's really, really powerful, the difference that your food can make, the difference that your sleep can make, the difference that the kind of light that you're exposed to can make. And I think it's very, very important that we start to look at those things really as a species, because we're doing a very, very bad job of really looking at all of the different variables and all the different things in our environment that affect how we feel and perform and show up in the world. And so that's seriously, seriously important. One big recommendation that I'm going to make right now, and I'm not getting paid to say this, although, that disclaimer seems almost kind of pointless to me. I would think that would be obvious, but like, go check out bulletproof.com. Like, please do this. Bulletproof Dave Asprey, if you're interested in being healthier, you need to be listening to his podcast, like, period. This person, out of all the hundreds of experts that I've listened to on these topics and various studies that I've looked at, he's probably the human being in the world at this point who pretty much knows the most about what it's going to take to get you performing at a level that is better than okay and better than good, right? Like, this is a man who really knows his shit. And coming into it, I'm going to ask that you suspend your disbelief, because some of what he says might appear a little bit crazy. First and foremost, he's not the Alex Jones of the health world. Like, seriously, he knows what he's talking about. It's grounded in science. He is an event correlation machine. He gets on a lot of intelligent, respected people at doctors and experts, people who do actually have licenses, unlike him, because he is not a doctor, and so on and so forth. Not trying to make a pitch for his company. But the other thing I would recommend is that you check out the Bulletproof Diet Roadmap, which basically will offer you the same advice that I would offer in terms of what foods you should avoid and what foods you should look to have. And one thing I want to go over is that something that he has effectively done, but something that I just kind of want to rehash here, is that regardless of how you eat now, or regardless of what diets you may have or may not have tried, there's a lot of things that diets sort of tend to get wrong. So one of those things is, and this is something that I've seen a lot in the community of celebrity chefs and kind of what they'll show you on the cooking channel and so on and so forth, or at restaurants, is that they'll tell you about the upside of a food, but they won't look at the downside. So looking at, oh, it has potassium, or it gives you vitamin C, et cetera, but they don't mention that it has, some poison or some protein that's not good for you, or it's going to cause a -5 IQ point swing or whatever else, or it's going to inflame you. Like peanuts are a great example, and to be honest, I'm blanking on a specific compound. I don't have any notes in front of me, but like at this point, I think it's well known. I think it's something like alpha toxin or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but that's in these peanuts, and it's something that, for me personally, I know causes me joint pain. I know causes me to be inflamed and causes immediate brain fog when I eat them. So I avoid peanuts, I avoid legumes, I avoid nightshades. I do things like that. I do have at the moment an autoimmune condition, right? So this is relevant, and I find that when I'm in ketosis, when I'm making intelligent choices, and I'm taking, full disclosure, I'll take about 2 Zyrtec in the morning for this condition. If I do that, and eat shit, I don't feel very good. My autoimmunity acts up. If I make intelligent food choices and I pretty much eat a bulletproof diet, my joints don't hurt at all. My brain turns on. All the things that I would want basically come back, and I'm not afflicted by that autoimmunity. And that's been a really, really big game changer for me, right? Because as to what the specific condition does, I'll just say, for the sake of simplicity, that it makes it very difficult to be in certain environments, especially warm environments, or to do certain activities. And when I take care of myself, that's no longer an issue. And so it's really changed my life. And for anybody out there suffering with, mild cognitive impairment, anybody out there suffering with low back pain or joint pain or any kind of discomfort, or just, a spare tire, you're not as lean and as attractive, or if you're having problems with really anything you can think of, erectile dysfunction, low libido, like the bulletproof diet, changing the way that you eat, sleep, and move is going to make like an 80% difference out of 100%. So it's going to make, in a real sense, like you're going to feel 10 times better if you start to look at those things. And I think that that's really, really important. So like I was saying, go check out Bulletproof, go read the Bulletproof Diet Roadmap. It'll take you, 10 minutes to scroll down the page. I suppose it depends on how fast your reader you are, but it's probably the equivalent of like a few pages or something like that of a book. So I think it's absolutely worth the read. And that pretty much would summarize the advice that I would give in terms of what you should eat and what you should avoid. But anyway, like I was saying about the rehash, they don't look at anti-nutrients. They don't look at micronutrients. They're not looking at the good things that you're getting in the food that aren't protein, fat, or carbs. And sometimes they don't even look at the macronutrients. They go like, okay, well, here's a carb, and it has the micronutrients that you want. But they miss the fact that ketosis is, in many ways, a highly advantaged state for a number of reasons. Some examples of it would be, we know that being in a ketogenic state and having ketones present, this is going to get a little bit complicated, but effectively what we've shown is that if you're taking, let's say, an exogenous ketone, even in the presence of carbohydrates, that it suppresses appetite, has certain epigenetic effects, and actually reduces inflammation just because of the presence of the ketones. So that's the first thing. So what that means is that having ketones present, or the benefits of ketones and ketosis, goes beyond just the restriction of carbohydrates. Having ketones present in and of itself makes the body better, makes the body more efficient and effective. And then if you add to that the removal of certain inflammatory foods like certain grains and legumes and nightshades and things like that, and you get the sugar out of the diet, and you go from having 50 grams of sugar a day to 5, you're going to feel a tremendous difference, and you're going to lose a lot of weight without really trying. If you have that weight to lose, you're going to lose that inflammation. You're going to feel a lot better. Now, first things first, I do want to say there is some subset of the population and some individuals that thrive on carbohydrates and that do poorly on a ketogenic diet, that do poorly on fat. So this isn't for them, right? If you're a Japanese person and you eat 3 bowls of white rice a day and you feel awesome, and all of your numbers are fantastic, and you have no interest in eating a bunch of fat, like, don't. Seriously, this is for people who find that they have a problem with brain fog, and find that they crash in the middle of the day, and find that they can't function without their caffeine, and find that they need carbs every 3 hours, right? So this is for those people that are struggling. And the other thing I want to offer you is that if you've never tried something like a ketogenic diet, and you're trying to figure out ways to improve your performance by 10, 20, 30% or more, I think the ketogenic diet can be really awesome, because the ketogenic diet is a great paradigm for making yourself better than good, better than okay. So it's not just for getting yourself to normal, it's for being super normal. And that's something that I'm interested in, something I'm very interested in, the art of making myself superhuman, one kind of biological hack at a time. And part of what I want to do with this podcast and with my blog is to sort of offer that to you guys as well, so we can do this together. Because frankly, like, what the fuck is the point of, me being better if all the people around me don't feel good and don't like their lives and wish they could perform better? I mean, actually, I want to help people to achieve their goals and to basically do better in life and to like the way that they feel more. So that's really important to me. But anyway, some of the other basic things, I guess, that I would mention briefly is sleep. And sleep is something that's like really, really important that gets neglected a lot. Probably the best advice that I've heard over the years of studying this that has actually helped me significantly is probably staying off my back. That's one of the biggest things that is kind of weird, because it's something I actually never thought about. I've read pretty much everything from the experts that I can think of, like keep your room cool, take a cold shower, sleep in the nude, etc., salt, magnesium, not exercising, caffeine, so on and so forth, vitamin D. Like, I've pretty much looked at everything you can think of, melatonin, L-theanine. I could go into more. But I've done a gazillion things to improve my sleep, and something that I've actually found really helps is a couple of things. Like I said, staying off your back, so actually sleeping on your side. Now, one thing they've shown, you can go look this up on PubMed, I think a number of studies have actually demonstrated this at this point, but is that the brain, when it's being cleaned, or when it's cleaning itself out at night, basically actually does this more efficiently when you sleep on your side than if you sleep on your back. And that's a really big deal if you want to perform better, which I think pretty much everybody does. If you want to, basically show up in the world with your A+ game instead of just your B+ game, then sleeping on your side, I think, actually can help to make a meaningful difference for that. That's one of the first things. The other things are probably find a good magnesium supplement. So there's a couple that I would recommend. The first one isn't just magnesium. It's actually a couple of things that I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it's got like magnesium glycinate, it's got L-theanine, I think it's got inositol in it, which is basically I believe a non-insulin, non-blood sugar impacting sweetener. You can think of it kind of like xylitol, and it's actually tastes pretty good. It's called Yin Reserve, so you can look that up. You can find that on, I think it's like, strengthsensei.com or like Strength Nutraceuticals or something like that. But you can just basically look up Charles Poliquin Yin Reserve and you'll find that. I tried that like twice, and that was actually a game changer in my sleep. Now, be forewarned, as I talked about cost before, this product does cost $50, and I believe that is for about a month's worth of servings. So you get 30 servings, $50 plus a $10 flat rate. So if you have the money and you want to buy more of his products, since it's only a $10 flat rate, you can kind of make it more worth buying by buying more things, since you're not going to increase the delivery cost, as far as I know. So that's definitely worth your time. Another thing that helped me was Sleep Mode, which is by Bulletproof, so Dave Asprey's company, and that actually works very well as well. Something I should note, I'm not a terribly big fan of taking melatonin all the time, because as many of you probably know, the thing about taking sort of hormones like that is that the body gets used to it and it makes less. And I don't want it to get to the point where I'm so dependent on melatonin that my body forgets how to make it, right? So I I think something like that would be especially good if you're jet lagged, but I don't know that I would take it every single night. Now, if you're somebody who sleeps really badly and you're an insomniac and you spend 14 hours in bed and you still don't feel good, then like take the shit every day so you can like have a life. I'm not gonna, tell you, oh, don't take drugs because of like, no. The point is to perform well. And the thing about performing well is that if you have to do something temporarily so you can figure out other ways to make yourself better that don't have the downside of taking melatonin all the time, you can only do that if you have the energy. So again, like, and this isn't exactly related, but I would say the same thing about anything like depression. If something like that's holding you back, like, yeah, get a drug that makes you feel 50% better so you can so you have the energy and the motivation to figure out other ways of improving yourself. Like, that's the point. And then eventually, at a later point, if you decide you want to dial it back or come off of it, you can. So yeah, sleep. And then there's basically the other basic things, which is if this is something you're comfortable with and something you can do, I would recommend sleeping naked. Honestly, I can't even articulate all the reasons why. I think a couple of them are the exposure to light, and the other thing would be body temperature, right? So really just being cooler, and I think just kind of being in the elements a little bit is good for us. It's something that we don't do enough in society. So I think sleeping nude is really important. I would say sleeping in a cool room. So if you live in a hot state, like, chances are if your room's 78 degrees, even if you don't think you're an insomniac, you're not sleeping as well as you could be. So I'd recommend getting that down to something that's comfortable for you. I can't tell you exactly what that number is. It could be 65 degrees, it could be 71 degrees, but figure out what that number is. Generally, I think it's like 68 is what, people have told me to shoot for. So that's what I would recommend, but that's just kind of a starting point. Let's see, what else? Yeah, so like I said, body temperature is really important, covered, not sleeping on the back, sleeping on the side, good magnesium supplement. Oh, so besides Yin Reserve, as far as magnesium goes, I would also recommend magnesium L-threonate. That is extremely good. I think I use like Magtine or something like that. I would check out strengthsensei.com and type in magnesium and then read the articles that he has on that. I think he's got one like 20 reasons why you need a good magnesium supplement that I think goes over the different forms and what they do for you. Threonate, and the reason that I would take it, especially for sleep, is because it has the highest bioavailability out of really any of the magnesiums, I believe, and it actually passes through the blood-brain barrier, so it gets magnesium into the brain, which is actually a good thing because it helps you to, relax cognitively, and it also, as you can imagine, if it helps you relax cognitively, turn off things like anxiety, which is really important, and it just helps you to get into that relaxed state. It absorbs quickly, and the other thing is it actually, like I said, it's bioavailable. It gets uptaken better, so it'll kind of improve your red blood cell magnesium, which is really key. So yeah, I mean, those are the main hacks, and there's the obvious things like not drinking coffee after 2 o'clock, and then if you're caffeine sensitive, and trust me, you'll know if you're caffeine sensitive, like if you drink half a cup of coffee and you have a headache, or if you like get the shakes, you're caffeine sensitive. So number one, I would say don't drink caffeine, or if you're going to like drink tea, maybe not coffee, or find a different coffee. Having stomach burn or heartburn or the shakes or anything like that isn't necessarily an indication that you're caffeine sensitive. It might be an indication that you're drinking shit coffee. I am not an expert on that, but I do know that if I drink certain kinds of coffee, like if I'm at someone's house and I drink like fucking Folgers Classic Roast, that I don't feel good. And if I come home and I have some decent organic coffee, that I don't have the problems there. So I can't articulate to you exactly why that's happening. I've heard a lot of different things. I've heard, mycotoxins, what beans are selected, how the beans are roasted, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, maybe it's as simple as like where the beans are coming from and what's in the soil. I don't really know. Could be all sorts of different things related to what's happening in the environment, but pesticides, whatever else it might be. But yeah, simple things like that. I guess something else that might not be as well known is dark chocolate. Dark chocolate contains caffeine, and I believe I believe it's called theobromine, but that doesn't really matter. It is, if I recall correctly, a caffeine-like substance that's found in dark chocolate that will also keep you awake. So my recommendation would be, if you're going to have dark chocolate, don't have it at night. I can't tell you exactly when you might want to stop eating it. I find that if I have dark chocolate, probably again past like 2 o'clock, that it does affect my sleep. So I would think about dark chocolate the same way I think about coffee. I am a fan of dark chocolate for stress, by the way. I'm also a fan of many things for stress, which I think is important. I'll get into that in a second because I think it's relevant. But as far as sleep goes, there's that. As far as movement goes, movement's a little bit more complicated in some ways because there are so many different ways to move. The basic recommendation that I would have is that if you're not exercising and if time is an issue, I would prioritize strength training. I would prioritize low reps with perfect form. And I would recommend doing the biggest and the best bang for your buck exercises. So that means not machines. It means doing the basic power lifts. So it means squat, deadlift, bench press, and overhead press. I would get very, very good at those movements. If you feel like you can't perform them properly, get a coach, lessen the weight, do what you can. Start with the fucking broom if you have to. I don't really care. But like, make sure you're doing the movements with immaculate form, and then get very, very good at doing those things. Do them, like I said, with a weight. With the weight that only allows you to do a few reps. And what I find, it's not necessarily true for everyone, but for the vast majority of people, this seems to be much more effective at improving the biomechanics of their movement, right? So especially for as people get older, people who have lower back pain, knee pain, hip pain, if they get strong, they offload the weight back onto the muscles and off of the joint, right? So that greatly improves their pain because they're not like grinding bones together all the time. So that's actually very, very important. Gaining muscle mass, and this is something that Paul Ekman, and I keep citing Paul Ekman here because he's such an expert on this stuff. He's been talking about for some time that sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle mass related to aging, and dynapenia, so you can think of it like dynamic, is the loss of power as you age. Those two things have some of the biggest impact on the quality of life that you can think of. I mean, I think they've shown in some study that many elderly adults, and I can't remember what the age was, I think it was something like 65 and older was the cutoff point, and they found that really like some number, and don't quote me on the specific statistics, but it was something like 17% of like women past that age can't lift 10 pounds, and like 8% of men, or some number, or 10% or whatever, couldn't either, like past like 65. Like, that's amazing, and that's a very, very significant portion of the population. And what's the main way you deal with that? Well, besides diet and sleep, it's exercise, right? And it's doing movements well, and then it's lifting a heavy enough weight, once again, to build strength and to build number one, real muscle, but also to build up the connective tissue and so on and so forth. So that's really, really key. There are other things I could go into as well, like exercising your vastus medialis obliquus, or your VMO, which is very, very important for your knee health. But rather than tell you about the Peterson step up, I would suggest that, well, actually, if you're struggling with knee pain specifically, or any kind of joint pain, I would recommend checking out Charles Poliquin. He's got a YouTube channel as well. I think it's Charles R. Poliquin or Strength Sensei, something like that. Type that in, and he has a video on the Peterson step up, which I believe, don't quote me on this, is Petersen, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a very good video on exercising your VMO, which once again is the muscle that effectively stabilizes your knee. So if you're having problems with knee pain, which I know is extremely common, that'll help regardless of whatever age you are. So there's a little hack there for you. So yeah, that's basically exercise. And then the last pillar that I would like to discuss before I wrap this up here is probably stress. So stress is a big deal, and there are a couple of basic recommendations. Number one, getting the first three pillars right will knock down your stress levels to about 10% of wherever they are now. So if you're really, really stressed, that means you're probably not going to be that stressed after you do those things. If you're eating enough fat, if you're getting enough sleep, if you're eating enough salt. Salt is like a big deal, right? Like your adrenals and your kidneys need fucking salt to function and to put out fires, right? Cortisol puts out fires, which is why when you're eating donuts and we're working 12 hours a day, you get stressed and you don't feel good. So you need salt. That's why people crave potato chips and ice cream, because they're looking for salt and sugar to help with stress. Because as many people at this point know, blood sugar spikes, insulin goes up, and then insulin is the antagonist to cortisol. Does that mean you should spike your insulin every time you get a little bit stressed? Absolutely not, because insulin is also the hormone of aging and of storage. So if you have a spare tire, insulin's not your friend. What is your friend, though, is quality sleep, which, again, takes me back to sleeping on your side, magnesium, staying cool, sleeping in the nude, etc., and then getting enough salt. What kind of salt? I would recommend unrefined salts. This is pretty basic stuff. Like, basically that means if you can find it, get some pink Himalayan salt, or get like that, whatever it's called, that French brown salt shit. You probably know what I'm talking about. Like, those are good. Or just any kind of, like, you know, basic decent sea salt that's not like fucking table salt. Table salt is extremely processed. And another myth that's out there is that unrefined salt doesn't have iodine. This is actually not true, because salt comes from the ocean, which contains iodine. It does have iodine. The thing is, though, is that when they process salts, what happens is basically they're processing out all those other nutrients and minerals, and what happens is iodine is the one thing that they add back in, which is why it's the iodized salt. But unrefined salts like pink Himalayan salt actually have iodine and like 70 other minerals that you want, that your body needs to function and that your body is naturally tended to have. It's kind of salt that our ancestors would have actually had access to. So I would recommend that. Something else I might recommend as a way of supplying more of it is to season your food to taste, to try lime and salt water. Actually, Charles has a recipe for that on his blog, although I think it's something like a 1/4 teaspoon per 8 ounces of water-ish, something like that, and then maybe like half a lime. So it's not really that complicated of a recipe, but something like that. I'm not always a big fan of acidic stuff for people who have teeth problems, because once again, it's not good for your enamel, so I'd be cautious of that. Like if you have a lime and you have tooth pain, or if your joints start hurting, like, we'll stop. But it can be good for some people. It can also be good for stomach acid and for detoxing and everything like that, which Charles also talks about in his blog. So again, I would check that out at strengthsensei.com. Once again, not getting paid to say this stuff, but I do want to help you guys and give you the tools that will help you to be successful. And this is like, not talking about myself here, but like, this is the good shit. Like, these are the foremost results getters on the planet that I've looked at, that I've been studying to try to make myself as good as I can be. And it's really made a fucking difference over like the 7 years that I've been doing this. So it's really, really key. Yeah, another big thing for stress, though, just one last thing before I wrap up here, is, you guessed it, meditation. You don't need to believe in any woo-woo to meditate. You don't have to be a Buddhist. You don't have to be Indian. All you really need is to close your eyes, sit in a chair, or sit cross-legged, and then focus on your breath. Focus on being mindful. Focus on being present in the moment. Focus on not checking your phone every 30 seconds. Focus on not being reactive and being proactive and things like that. And really just getting used to actually breathing and seeing how the body feels. And to that end, I would recommend Headspace. That's a very good app for that in terms of guided meditation for people who haven't done it before. You can start with the Take 10, I believe it's called, which is like this, quite literally a 10-day, 10-minute a day little meditation thingy-majig that can help you to get started there. I believe Sam Harris, who, love him or hate him, is a pretty good meditator. I think his app is either coming out or has already come out. So maybe you check that out as well. I don't know how much that costs, but that, I would imagine, given that I've listened to his guided meditation before, would be absolutely worth your time. There's also other things like Tara Brach and things like that, that you can check out. But yeah, really anything that helps you meditate, whether you go on YouTube and listen to binaural beats, or whether you listen to your favorite song, or whether you meditate on a run or at the gym, mindfulness is really important. It's really important for relaxation. So I would recommend that, and I would recommend looking into that. I don't really have a lot of tips for you there. The main thing that I would say is, and something that's helped me meditate recently is, well, not just recently, the first thing I would say is, don't focus on getting somewhere with meditation. Don't try to force yourself to be calm. Don't focus on anything. Like, just kind of let thoughts pass. Don't focus on, detach yourself from your thoughts and recognize that you're not choosing to think the thoughts that are coming into your view. They're just kind of coming in, and you can choose the kind of relationship that you have with them. So that's really key. So listen to what's happening in your body, but learn to detach and not identify with it. I think that's really key. The other tip is something that comes from an episode, is actually an Ask Me Anything, I believe it was with Joseph Goldstein and Sam Harris on the Waking Up podcast, wherein Joseph talked about this question that he asks himself when he's meditating, which is, what are the filters of the mind? And when I asked myself this while meditating, I found that I was actually able to get a lot more into the meditation, and I found that it was a lot more useful. And actually, that being the last tip, the last thing I want to mention before I go here is naps. So for sleep, like, naps are seriously important. Something that I learned probably like a year or two ago now is that naps don't necessarily mean falling unconscious and sleeping like regular sleep. Like, a nap is basically, at least the way I do it, because I don't fall asleep very quickly typically, is a laying down meditation. So I'll get 2 pillows, so that way my body's kind of in alignment, and you can Google that, or kind of, just intuitively know what I'm talking about, and lay on my side. I'll throw on some earbuds or some headphones or whatever, and I'll listen to some ASMR or something relaxing, and I will just close my eyes, and I will just kind of basically rest and sort of meditate for 30 to 40 minutes or whatever. Might be 10 minutes, might be 15, might be 20, might be 5, probably not 5, but you can do this for literally 10 minutes and feel super refreshed if you're feeling a little groggy. So for those of you who are going, man, I've been working for 5 hours and I'm just not feeling that productive now, I'm feeling sleepy, like, maybe the solution is that you take a 15-minute power nap. And I think if you do that well, you'll find that you will be refreshed as if you got 2 hours of additional sleep. So I think that's really powerful. So anyway, I hope that this video or this podcast was helpful for you. I hope that some of these tips and hacks and thoughts and so on and so forth will help you to hack your biology and improve the way that you feel. That way you can get more done and get towards more of your desired outcomes. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.